Hello guys, because we didn't have too much time during lesson time to go through SRQ, so today this video will start on SRQ part A question. So as a recap, section B, SRQ, and question 2 refers to both parts A and B of SRQ. So 2A will be the SRQ part A kind of question, or part B will be the SC question. Then here at the top, the words in bold will tell you the issue of these SRQ. So being part of a globalized world, this will refer to the issue 3, globalization. So you will know from this heading here what is the issue of this whole SRQ. Then for the purpose of this video, because we are only going to look at SRQ part A first, so we will just read extract 1, because remember extract 1 is meant only for SRQ part A. So let's read. The anti-globalization movement gained widespread media attention after violent protests broke out against the World Trade Organization in Seattle in late November and early December 1999. Internationally, the movement participants have also launched campaigns targeting multinational corporations such as Nike. So basically, extract 1 is telling you that there's been anti-globalization movement, it has gained widespread media attention, and there's been violent protests as part of this movement, and participants have also launched campaigns targeting MNCs like Nike. So after reading this, you go on to the part at the bottom, where it states, extract 1 describes the anti-globalization movement. So usually there will be this line or this sentence before the proper question is being asked. There will be this sentence summarizing what is extract 1 all about. So this is a summary. So extract 1 tells you that there's been anti-globalization movements. In your opinion, why? So now is the question, why do some people have such strong negative opinions about globalization? And explain your answer using 2 reasons. So for this question, take note that you are supposed to give 2 reasons to explain why there have been strong negative opinions about globalization. So explain why using 2 reasons. And notice we are not asking for 2 strategies. So you are not going to come up with 2 strategies or 2 solutions to solve a problem. Rather, now you are going to give 2 reasons to explain why some people are having very strong negative opinions about globalization. So question here is, do I go back to extract 1 and use the details here and talk about World Trade Organization or to talk about Nike? The answer is no. Extract 1 only tells you the background of, let's say the meaning of anti-globalization movement. But in your answer, you are not supposed to repeat whatever that's mentioned in extract 1. So don't treat extracts like sources. You are not supposed to quote anything from them. They just tell you the context of the question, the background of the question. So if we go back to the question again, the question clearly is asking about reasons in general why there are strong negative opinions about globalization. So then how do you come up with the 2 reasons? One of which is you can use, think of the content that we have learned in class so far about globalization. Is there anything there that can answer this question? Secondly, you can also think about your general knowledge. Have you read something online or in the newspapers that can help you answer this question? So you can see here the question here is quite open. We are not restricting you to just content knowledge. You can use your general knowledge, examples from your general knowledge as well, to answer this question. So here, how do I unpack this question? Firstly, strong negative opinions about globalization is our question focus. We want to explain why. So think about this. Why would people have negative opinions about something? It must be because they view that thing as bad. So here, why would people have strong negative opinions about globalization? Because they view globalization as something bad. Okay, so when we say that something is bad, it means that it must have caused some negative impacts, and that's why people don't like it. Okay, so if you scope it to this, okay, negative impacts from our content knowledge, okay, what are you reminded of? Think about this, negative impacts. We have learned something about the negative impacts of globalization, and that is actually chapter 9, the economic impacts of globalization. Okay, we have economic impacts. Okay, let's look at the notes again for chapter 9. For chapter 9, it is divided into 3 big groups: economic impacts on countries, economic impacts on companies, and economic impacts on individuals. And under each big group, there is a positive impact, there is a negative impact on countries. Similarly, for companies, there is a positive impact, there is also a negative impact. Okay, same for individuals, there is also a positive impact as well as a negative impact. Okay, and all these are impacts of globalization, specifically the economic impacts of globalization. So going back to the question, negative impacts, chapter 9, for this question, then you have some clues how to answer. Okay, if you go back to the notes, you can either talk about these negative impact of an economic downturn as a result of globalization, or you can talk about companies having lower profits or lower market share as a result of globalization. You can also choose to talk about the loss of income experienced by some individuals as a result of globalization. So out of these 3, you can just write 2 because the question asks for 2 reasons. Okay, so now I'm going to show you the steps of how to write the answers as well as the answers. Okay, so step number 1, okay, always state the first reason. So instead of telling me the first strategy is, take note that we are answering this question which requires 2 reasons and not 2 strategies. So you will start by telling me one reason for this is, okay, or the first reason for this is, okay, so the format is like that. One reason that some people have negative opinions about globalization is, okay, notice this one comes from the question focus. So I repeat it down here to remind myself later on that I should describe and explain according to the question focus. Okay, so here I'm stating my reason. It is because globalization does not guarantee economic growth or development for countries and may even result in economic downturn. Okay, that's why some people are so against it. Second step, okay, we have to describe the reason with examples. After stating, okay, it is very natural that you would go on to describe and elaborate more. So this second step will be describing and giving specific examples. So notice that I've chosen to use the negative impact of an economic downturn to answer this question as the first reason. So the examples in the description can actually come from the notes. Okay, here when I talk about economic downturn, and specifically the example of the 2008 global financial crisis, which began in the US but eventually affected many countries worldwide. Okay, then eventually Singapore was not spared as well. We also experienced recession as a result of the 2008 global financial crisis. Okay, so here what I will do is I will give a brief description of this 2008 global financial crisis as an example of an economic downturn. Okay, so the example will fit the reason. In this case, I will briefly describe that it started off as an American financial crisis, but because Singapore is heavily dependent on international trade and the provision of goods and services internationally, okay, as a result of the financial crisis that other countries besides America also experienced, exports for Singapore fell, okay, because when the economy is not doing well, people in other countries do not have the same buying power as before. Their financial capacity or their financial ability will drop. Okay, so because of this, they will buy less of our exports. Okay, and therefore exports earnings for Singapore fell. Tourism revenue for Singapore also fell because fewer people will want to come to Singapore, okay, for holiday, because now again with a recession, people will be more cautious about their spending and they will want to save more rather than to spend so easily. So tourism revenue for Singapore also dropped. And eventually, because of this, it affected Singapore's economy and we also experienced a recession. Okay, so I briefly described the economic downturn. Then the last step will be to explain how therefore an economic downturn as a result of globalization does cause people to have negative opinions about globalization. Okay, so I will start by saying what is the connection between globalization and the reason of economic downturn. So globalization has resulted in greater interconnections and interdependence among countries, therefore making the economies of countries vulnerable to external changes in the global economy. Okay, so notice I'm trying to make the connection about economic downturn and its connection to globalization. Because going back to the question, the focus is why some people have strong negative opinions about globalization. So there is a need to explain the connection between globalization and why did we suddenly mention economic downturn here? How does globalization results in economic downturn? That connection must be explained. So here I'm saying that globalization has resulted in greater interconnections, and therefore when, let's say, US sneezes, the whole world catches a cold. Okay, all the economies that have financial dealings or trade relations with US would also suffer as well. They will be very vulnerable to the changes happening in the American or the global economy. Okay, and because of these, here I say an economic downturn in one country does have the power to cause economic downturns in other countries as well. Okay, and when countries experience economic downturns, okay, why do people feel negative about it? Okay, because an economic downturn will result in various problems such as retrenchment, business failure, okay, and resulting in falling national income for the whole country and falling GDP. This will retard the economic growth of the country, causing a lower standard of living for these countries, and therefore with such consequences, that's why people have negative opinions about globalization. They dislike globalization because of all these negative impacts. Okay, moving on to the second reason, okay, because I've given the reason on economic downturn, the next reason I can choose can be from the negative impacts on companies or the negative impact on individuals. So for this purpose, I've chosen the one about the negative impact on individuals in the form of a loss of incomes. Okay, so I go on to describe how will individuals lose income because of globalization. Okay, so here I describe that MNCs is a key driving force of globalization. Correct. So the connection of MNCs to globalization is that because globalization has resulted in increased connectivity, okay, and increased mobility for MNCs to change their production bases whenever opportunities arise, this has caused some problems for the workers in the countries, okay, the MNCs set up their factories in, but later on they change their factories to other countries. So here the example from our notes is the one on Uniqlo. Okay, so initially we know that Uniqlo used to operate in China, their factory production base is in China, but later on, okay, when the production cost for China went up, Uniqlo reacted by shifting its production base to Vietnam because Vietnam could offer lower production costs and lower labor costs. So to cut costs, Uniqlo shifted from China, they shifted its production base from China to Vietnam. So the consequences for the workers in China who were employed under Uniqlo initially was that they lost their jobs. Okay, so Chinese workers lost their jobs when Uniqlo closed down its factory in China. And we call this a move that benefited Uniqlo, the MNC, but at the expense of Chinese workers. Okay, and go on to give additional details such as how this incident showed that although attracting foreign companies to a country to produce goods, okay, may help to achieve economic growth for that country, okay, in a short span of time. But if MNCs were to leave the country, this would create problems for the country, okay, when these MNCs shift out, okay, of their country. So it is an unsustainable model for economic growth, okay, by depending on MNCs to operate in your own country. So here, last step, I will explain how, okay, going back to the question focus, how because of a loss of incomes that some individuals experience due to globalization, how these thus results in people having negative opinions about globalization. So I will start again by explaining the link between globalization and the loss of incomes. So here I explain that globalization caused increased mobility of MNCs to shift production bases and exploit opportunities in different countries. So whenever the opportunities arise for MNCs to go elsewhere, they shift their operations out of a country. This would cause the individuals in the original country to lose their jobs and incomes. And don't just stop here. Carry on and tell me what is so bad about losing jobs and incomes. So when people lose their jobs and incomes, this would cause high unemployment rates in the country. This would cause poverty. This would cause sufferings for the people, lowering their standards of living. Also, when countries experience high unemployment rates, this would cause a fall in labor income because fewer people in the country are now earning because they are no longer working. So this would cause a fall in labor income, resulting in a fall in national income and GDP. And this will retard the growth, the economic growth of the country. And with such consequences, therefore, people are against globalization. So notice, I will always end off my answer by going back to the question focus. Okay, so similarly for reason number 1, I also end off my explanation, okay, with the question focus. Okay, the next part of this video will focus on another question, okay, to give you all more exposure to this kind of reasons question. But take note that these questions for SRQ part A, anything can come out from issue 1 and issue 3. Okay, it may be questions that we have discussed in class before. It also may be questions that we have not discussed before, but which you can use, okay, some of the content knowledge that you already know or some general knowledge that you already have. Okay, so please watch part 2 of this video.